Coming up today on LMM, the 48 goes up a ramp, gets picked up and does some shunting.
Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM and welcome back to Alstom's works on Lichchurch Lane in Derby. As you can see behind me is my own Ruston 48 which has taken part in the hugely successful Greatest Gathering. And now, well, pretty much everything has disappeared and gone home, bar this. So today the mission is that we need to get this, take it to the other side of the site where it will be picked up by the high-hab and take it home. So before we can move it, we need to go through the preparation and make sure she's safe to go onto the traverser, down across the site, possibly another traverser, and then further on. And to be able to take this and get it to trundle through the site, that's going to be absolutely fantastic because all being well, we're doing it on her own power.
Because the thing had sat around for almost a month at this point, my first job was to go and inspect my axle boxes, and this was done by taking out the filler cap and throwing a load of oil inside them to make sure that they had the correct level. Once oil comes flowing out, then you know the thing is well and topped up. Most of these came off easily enough by hand, however one of them refused to play ball, so I had to improvise.
Adjustable clamp spanner.
I took a moment to revel in my own genius before returning to the task at hand and topping up my axle boxes. Next, I could open up the engine bay doors and bask in the glory that is Ruston's 4 VRH engine. Inside there were various belts and greases to twist, and on the other side I had my dipstick to ensure that my engine still had some of that black shiny stuff inside it, which it did, which was positive. That then concluded my jobs on the ground floor, so I could ascend up into the cab to see if there was still oil inside the gearbox. With that completed, it was time to head outside and use my fancy measuring stick to see if I still had diesel inside my tank or if it had all gone walkies during my stay. The fancy technology confirmed that I did indeed have diesel, and then I could see if there was any coolant inside. With all of my checks complete, I could go back inside the cab, throw the buttons and fire the thing back into life. Or at least that had been the plan. Yes, that's right, the 48 in front of all of the staff refused to start. It appeared that all of this blowing of the horn during the Greatest Gathering had totally drained the battery. Due to everything going wrong, we are now taking the car to the 48 because I need the battery off this to start the 48. Which means that we said that we needed the car, and then they went, do you really? And we went, yes. So I'm now driving through an active industrial site in my car, which I am 90% sure...
We've gone the wrong way multiple times.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's not going well.
Left?
D2, DT, we'll go up the top, I think. Having navigated our way back to the 48, yanked the battery out of the X-Trail and carefully installed it in the 48, we were ready to try again. In the time it had taken me to get the poxy thing to start, the chaps from Alstom had gone and collected the traverser, and now it was ready for me to drive my diminutive little locomotive onto this massive great traverser.
Right, here we go.
Whilst I was very excited that the guys were allowing me to drive my own locomotive up and onto the traverser, I was also quite nervous because when they moved it previously, it was dragged into position, and they are quite a steep angle for a locomotive to drive up. But without too much of a fuss, she was up and onto the traverser, marking possibly the first time a Ruston 48 has been on a traverser under its own power this millennium.
Somewhere there?
Having made the locomotive secure and ensured it wasn't going to go anywhere, I hopped down, the weight of the moment not being lost on me as I took a lingering look at my locomotive sat there on the traverser. This was something that I'd wanted to arrange the moment it had been agreed that it was going to go to the Greatest Gathering.
That motor's got more power than my 48 has.
The operator of the Traverser asked if I wanted to come up into the command centre and get a view of moving my locomotive from the control desk, and of course, I couldn't refuse. Being able to see the Traverser actually move was pretty awesome, because this is an incredible piece of kit, and to be up in the command centre was more awesome still, but the creme de la creme was the fact that my tiny little locomotive was being moved sidewards. Not a movement normally associated with railway locomotives is that going sideways thing across sight, a very weird angle for it to be going. The little 48 has certainly had quite some adventures since it entered my ownership. I couldn't be more proud of the little thing. Doesn't it look ridiculous, sat on the massive great electric Traverser? Frankly, this was the kind of sight that I thought I would only ever get to see represented in model form, not to be able to witness it in real life in true one-to-one scale, and certainly never did I think that I'd be able to have my own locomotive sat on a working Traverser. And I owe a massive debt of gratitude to everybody at Alstom who stopped what they were doing to allow this mad movement to happen. As we passed all the different roads, you realise what an incredibly useful and space-saving piece of equipment this is. You can access a whole host of different lines without the needs of points and such, which take up a lot more room. Which goes some way to explain why there are no less than 3 different Traversers across the site here at Litchurch Lane.
So where are we going?
The line upon this line here.
Oh, fantastic.
Having arrived and aligned ourselves with the rails, it was time to deploy the ramps. And then, having taken one last look at the 48 to appreciate how bonkers this was, it was time to depart.
Here we go again.
So all I had to do was drive my little locomotive off the Traverser, and you may say, well, it got up there, so surely getting off will be just as easy. Well, no, because the guys at Alstom had warned me that this road was lower than the road that we'd been stabled on before, and they were worried that my guard irons might foul as we dropped down and get the locomotive stuck. And so there was a lot of debate of whether or not we actually even attempt to do this. But we decided we'd give it a go and see what happens. So gingerly I lined up with the ramps, and then, well, we went for it. It is frankly the steepest gradient that I will ever drive the 48 up or down. With a little shuffle, we were ready to complete the offloading, and it turned out that those fears were indeed justified, as the guard irons caught on the hinges for the ramp, which required a little bit of persuasion for the 48 to come free, and some rather concerned look from the assembled staff from Alstom around us.
I heard it, I went, oh no!
And then, free from the Traverser, I was allowed to drive my engine through the works. Yes, my little diesel through an active site where they build new trains. This isn't a heritage railway, this is a proper working bit of railway infrastructure, and they were letting me drive my little Ruston 48 through it. This is literally the stuff that dreams are made of, and I am really in the debt of everybody who was involved in making this happen. This was absolutely glorious. And there's something very special about having the last 48 to drive itself through a proper working industrial setting. In my opinion, this makes it a working industrial engine now. Now, whilst I was indeed driving my locomotive, I hadn't been left unsupervised. I had one of the guys from Alstom on the footplate with me, and the locomotive was surrounded by people on foot, keeping an eye on everything and making sure everything was tickety-boo. Whilst there can be no denying that so much has changed during the work's 149-year history, so much of the flavour of the original works still survives. There are so many buildings littered around the sites that hark back to those early days of the railway. All of our history, with all of those vehicles built, all of the stories of the people who built them, and the stories of those vehicles and what they went on to do. The backbone of Britain, moving people and goods all around the country, all vital to everyday life. All of that history is steeped in this site, and the 48 blended in so amazingly well with it. It looks from that period of the heyday of the railways and looked absolutely superb making its way through this site. In fact, out of all the places that I've ever taken it, this was where it looked the very best. It was absolutely perfect in amongst all of that railway heritage. And now its own story blends in and is part of the history of this amazing site. One of the best bits was reaching the end of the first block of buildings. This section here is where the other traverser works. However, the railway that we were on went straight through. During my time, I have been extremely lucky to take part in some absolutely incredible railway activities, but I don't think I have ever had such a large sensation of I really shouldn't be able to do this than what I was doing right now. Driving my locomotive through an active industrial workspace. It was absolutely phenomenal. More so was the fact that I'd been prepped previously that we might not be able to do this because all of the staff have regular jobs to do. After the greatest gathering, production has now restarted and everybody is busy. They don't really have the times to marshal a silly little diesel across the site. But the fact that everybody made the time to do it and they seemed just as excited as I was to make this happen was absolutely magical. Because I know full well I am never getting the opportunity to do something like this again. It was absolutely magic. I really loved getting to trundle past stock some 40 years younger than the 48 and bits of trains yet to be built. It's an amazingly huge site, and there was something ridiculously wonderful about having such a tiny engine making its way through it. All too soon though, we'd reached our rendezvous point with the lorry, and it was time to park up and wait for our chariot to arrive. And once again, the movement was going to be carried out by our friends over at S C Fabrications, who are now getting quite familiar with moving the little 48. As ever, the first stage was to deploy the outriggers. These are an important step in preventing the crane from falling over when it picks up the mighty weight of the Ruston 48. There's a pair on the front and a pair on the rear, both of which have these little pads to help spread the surface area so they don't damage the floor beneath them. Once everything was out, they get to unfurl the main jib, and every time I'm amazed how something that big and powerful folds up into a space that small. It's a fascinating thing to watch unfurling itself. Once the jib was deployed, the next stage was to connect it up to the lifting chains and hoist them clear of the deck. These would be connected to the spreader, and this was a very important component because it stopped the chains from crushing my 48 as they lift. So you'll notice they go to a centre point, and my 48 is quite oblong. To the spreader were attached the lifting strops, and these were then swung round into position to pick up the 48. Despite having proof that this particular system works, every time I see this lifting apparatus, I am struck by how slender and skeletal it looks. This, to my mind, does not look capable of picking up a Ruston 48, even though I've seen it done before. And although I trust the guys and I trust my own eyes, it still fills me with a certain kind of dread as I see it swinging towards the locomotive, because surely that's not enough to pick up a locomotive. With the contraption hanging ominously above the 48's head, the operator went around and hooked the slings over the buffers, getting it ready to be picked up into the air and put onto the bed of the truck. And then, having had the straps take the strain, she was ready for takeoff. You would have thought by now that I would be used to seeing the 48 in the air, but it's one of those things that you never really get used to it being in such an unnatural position high above the ground. It's just not where a loco should be.
This is the bit I always really hate, that moment when it's in the middle of the swing. Just feels so completely unnatural.
The crane slowly swung the metal pinata towards the awaiting bed, and you've got to accept, as dubious as this looks, this is a far easier way to move a locomotive than your traditional load loader. And of course, to a degree, the Ruston 48 was somewhat designed for just this. There are even holes in the side of the frames where you're meant to install lifting eyes to make picking it up even easier. These were the digger, the forklift truck, the dump truck of their day, designed to be moved from site to site, and so going on the back of a lorry wasn't really something that uncommon for a locomotive like this. Although that said, mine spent its entire life working at the James Copper paper mill, but that's beside the point. After what felt like an age of the thing hanging in the air, we were ready to put it down on the bed. The driver had put out some planks of wood to help spread the load. If we were to just put it down straight on the bed, the flanges would go straight through that nice wood that makes up the deck, and that's a surefire way to upset those nice people who are moving your locomotive. Ever so gently, the operator placed Sir William down on said bits of wood, and then, as soon as it was safe to do so, I went in to make sure I was happy with where the engine was sitting. And that marked the end of its adventure here at Alstom. It had left the site's railway. All that remained was to break out the big heavy chains, strap it down, and head for home. With the operator having moved the 48 before, it didn't take long to ratchet everything down nice and tight to ensure that the 48 wasn't going to move during the journey, which is generally well advised. Then all they had to do was disconnect the straps from the buffers and move the whole thing clear, and then it was just a matter of disassemble, taking the straps off and collapsing the spreader bar down to its compact form and putting it down on the deck of the transporter. Then that was strapped down, and then it was just a matter of breaking out some extra ratchet straps, throwing them over the 48 and ratcheting everything down tight. And with the load secure and unlikely to move, all that remained was to bring the outriggers back in. And every time I watch this, I am fascinated by the way they somersault themselves into the upright position, ready for storage. I think it's a super neat idea. Rather than having to have a space on the side, the fact they just flip round just makes total sense and is a proper cool bit of design. Once they'd all been stowed, we were ready to depart and make our way out of the Alstom complex. This would be the 48's final trip through the works, and admittedly, this time it was significantly faster. But what an amazing thing to have been part of, to have had my little locomotive here at this historic site. This very, very large historic site. And even though the 48 was now safely mounted on the back of a lorry, capable of doing many times faster than the 48 could ever dream of, getting out wasn't as simple as, say, just turning right, because this place is a bit of a labyrinth, full of one-way systems, and the fact that exit is written clearly on the floor and we were going entirely the wrong way. So that meant we had to swing the whole thing round, go back where we'd come from, and try and find the way out of this huge, great site. And what was absolutely incredible as we slowly made our way towards the exit was to be surrounded by all of this industry, all ramping up to be part of the future of rail transportation within the UK, and it's so exciting to see stuff being built in Britain. So often when I'm reviewing older locomotives, I lament the loss of British manufacturing, but it's so exciting to see it actually still happening here in Derby, home of the LMS, home of the Midland Railway, still keeping that legacy alive. As we made our way towards the gate, my only real regret was that I didn't get to drive the 48 on more of the extensive network here at the works. There was so much track that I really wished that I could have taken the 48 down on, but maybe we could do that on another time. And as the 48 finally made its way away from the site, I must extend my thanks to everybody at Alstom, not only for putting on the greatest gathering, but also for hosting us, the 48, and allowing me to drive the thing through the site. My locomotive's holiday to Derby is something that I will never, ever forget. By now, the 48 was out on the open road, but Tom and I had to stop at security to hand over our badges and say goodbye to everybody, which meant by the time that we hit the road, the lorry and the 48 had built up quite a significant lead on us, which meant we had to play catch-up.
It's a thoroughly strange sensation, isn't it, to catch up with an locomotive?
Especially your one.
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
I mean,
It's not supposed to be up there.
isn't it? such a weird thing to see. There it goes.
As we'd overtaken, that meant we could get a shot of it as it went past. And then the game could continue of overtake, stop and film, overtake and repeat. And just like that, Sir William McAlpine arrived safely back at the Whitwell and Reefham Railway. All that remained now was to unload it and put it back on the rails, and to this end we decided to put it directly onto Road 3 rather than the arrival road to avoid doing a big shunt. So all that remained was to unstrap and get it off. Asking the operator to offload in a different position showed the versatility of the lorry, with the front outriggers being high enough to reach over the top of the fence to get the required stability. The ones at the back being much shorter couldn't, but as the weight's towards the front, that didn't matter. As he deployed the other side, I'm fascinated by these front rams that somersault themselves round. I just think they're super cool. And once that one and the other rear one had been deployed, it was time to deploy the crane. And I know that I've said this before on many occasions, but how can something so powerful concertina itself into such a small space? It's just absolutely fascinating. Every time I watch this thing deploy and unfurl, I am absolutely spellbound by it. It's such an incredible piece of equipment, and the amount that it can lift at quite a significant range is really very impressive as well. So if you need something being picked up and moved, don't hesitate to get in touch with S C Fabrications. From locomotives to whatever else you can think of, they'll probably be able to pick it up and move it to where you need it, and they are super friendly guys. With the crane out, it was time to deploy the spreader again, and attach the straps to that and lift them all heavenward, ready to go round the buffers of the 48. At some point I am going to install the lifting eyes on the side so we can pick it up properly and not by the buffers, but it's one of those jobs that just isn't at the top of my priorities right now, as the locomotive basically works and I have many other projects that need love and attention right now. So for now, we're just going to pick it up by the buffers because, well, it seems to work, doesn't it? And with the slings over the buffers and permission from air traffic control to take off, we once again headed into the skies. This time I wanted to make things a little more complicated, because I like my locomotives to face the other way round. So not only did we have to pick it up and place it on the rails, we also had to turn it a full 180 degrees, which actually sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is. All you have to do once it's in suspension is give it a slight little push and the thing pirouettes around quite nicely. This was the first time I think we've ever loaded a locomotive onto number 3 road at the Whitwell and Reefham Railway, and frankly I don't know why we've not done it before for the 48, because in order to clear our loading road it involves clearing everything out of that, which is a fairly major shunt. This is so much quicker and so much easier, and I'm probably going to be picking it up and moving it from here in the future because it's just so much easier. Picking it up and putting it on the back of the truck is obviously a lot easier and quicker than trying to align it with the rails. Anybody who's got a model railway set knows that that's always the pain in the backside thing, getting the thing to sit on the rails. But with additional help to steer it onto the rails, we were soon back down on terra firma, back home at the Whitwell and Reefham Railway. And this really does mark her adventure coming to an end. As the strops went loose, she was back home, safe on the steel.
I hate it being in the air. I hate it. And these guys are great. These guys are absolutely superb. They do a wonderful job, but it's not natural for a locomotive to be in the air. It's just not right.
With my little rant over, all that remained was to take the spreader and the strops off and stow them away, fold the jib down into its contorted form, and then for the 100th time this video, bring all of the outriggers in, again marvelling at the way that they somersault themselves back away, and how the fence just happened to be the right height for this to work. And then, well, it was time to do my checks and restart the locomotive.
And so here we are, safely back on the rails at the Whitwell and Reefham Railway. And just because it's back here, it doesn't mean that she's now available for use. After any journey like this, she now needs to be inspected and approved by the railway before she can re-enter traffic. So it's over the pit, ready for the loco superintendent to come have a look. Now, whilst we're here and the crane's here, they're doing a lift behind us, so all the activities haven't finished, and we had to move that into position ready for the lift.
Sitting behind the 48 is Andrew Barclay, number 945 of 1904 Annie, one of the oldest Andrew Barclays in preservation, and the first steam engine to be based at the Whitwell and Reefham Railway in preservation, although she has been out of traffic now for quite some time, requiring a heavy overhaul. Although, as you can see, work to bring her back into service is already well on the way, and today's movement was going to be putting the frames off from the wheel set so both can receive attention. It's really nice for the 48 to actually be a useful asset to the railway and be able to undertake small shunting moves like this, and for me it just makes me feel really good. Once the brake had been applied to both vehicles, Ben went in between to uncouple the two locomotives so I could move the 48 clear.
Thank you.
Right, you make sequels.
For those of you less familiar with steam locomotive maintenance, or for you thinking what kind of damage did this thing sustain to warrant such an extensive strip down, this is just the life cycle of having a steam locomotive. You see, a boiler is certified for 10 or 11 years with an extension worth of use, and then it has to be taken out of the frames, inspected, and then recertified. Whilst this is being done, we take the opportunity to strip every other moving part, to look for wear and other signs of damage and repair it whilst the boiler is being done at the same time. So whilst this looks a rather big job, it's just part of having a steam engine. And once she was safely down on the blocks, work could commence on getting this one back into traffic.
But now all of that's done, well, that's the end of this video. She went to the greatest gathering. She's been part of the single biggest gathering of locomotives in this country ever. And for a little 48, I couldn't be more proud. So if you have enjoyed this video, how about clicking somewhere there for the video where we went to the greatest gathering, or over there for the video of the greatest gathering. And with that, well, thank you all very much for watching. I hope to see you all again soon. Ta-da.